My name is Ryan, and I'm 35 years old. It's strange how life can go from feeling like a dream to a slow-moving nightmare, all without you realizing it's happening. If you told me 6 years ago that my marriage to Danielle would unravel the way it has, I would have laughed in your face. We were inseparable back then. Passionate, spontaneous, and so connected it felt like the world could crumble around us, and we'd still be standing together. Danielle had this spark about her, a way of lighting up any room she walked into. When we first met at a coffee shop in Denver, her laugh was what caught my attention. It wasn't just loud, it was contagious, like you couldn't help but join in. She was charming, whip-smart, and had this mischievous streak that kept life interesting. It was the kind of connection you read about in romance novels, fireworks, stolen kisses, and late-night drives under the city lights. I thought we had it all. But somewhere between the honeymoon phase and year 5 of marriage, something shifted. Slowly at first, so subtly I couldn't put my finger on it. The moments we used to steal for each other dwindled. The laughs we used to share were replaced with curt nods and distracted glances. She started staying late at work more often, brushing off my questions with, "I've got deadlines, Ryan. You know how it is." And I did. Or at least I thought I did. The real wake-up call came about 6 months ago. It was a Thursday night, and I'd made dinner. A simple pasta dish, nothing fancy, but I'd put in the effort. Danielle came home late, her face buried in her phone as she kicked off her shoes. "Hey," I said, setting down her plate at the table. She glanced up briefly, barely smiling. "Thanks. I'm not that hungry, though." I sat across from her, trying not to show my frustration. "You've barely been eating these days." She shrugged, scrolling on her phone. "Work stress. It's nothing." Her tone was dismissive, and I felt a pang of something I hadn't wanted to acknowledge until that moment. Rejection. That night, after clearing the untouched plates from the table, I brought up what had been gnawing at me for months. "Danielle, can we talk?" She was already in bed, scrolling through Instagram like she wasn't in the same room as me. "About what?" "Us," she sighed, putting her phone down. "What about us?" I hesitated. "I just feel like we're not us anymore. We barely spend time together. We don't talk. I don't know, things just feel off." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked annoyed. "Ryan, not everything has to be a deep conversation. Maybe you're just overthinking things." Overthinking. That was her favorite response to everything lately. "I'm not overthinking," I pressed. "Danielle, I'm trying to tell you that I feel like we're drifting apart. I miss you. I miss us." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Ryan, we're fine," she said flatly. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be."
I'm tired.
"Can we just go to sleep?" And that was it. End of discussion. Except for me, it wasn't. As I lay awake next to her that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that terrified me. I felt lonelier lying beside her than I ever did sleeping alone. That was the first crack. But it was far from the last. Over the next few months, I tried everything. And I mean everything. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel on my marriage, no matter how much Danielle seemed determined to act like I didn't exist. I started with the obvious, date nights. I booked reservations at the places she used to love, the kinds of restaurants where we'd sit for hours, laughing and talking until they had to kick us out. But now, she'd barely glance up from her phone, tapping away like she had somewhere more important to be. "This is nice, Ryan," she'd say, her voice flat, her eyes glued to the screen. "Nice." That's what my effort had been reduced to, a half-assed, indifferent nice. I kept trying. Flowers. Handwritten notes. Cleaning the house so she wouldn't have to. I even took up cooking, real cooking, not just tossing pasta into boiling water and calling it a day. Did it matter? Not a damn bit. Danielle would toss out a quick, "Thanks, babe," like she was complimenting a coworker for handing her a stapler, then go right back to her scrolling or work. I wanted to scream at her, shake her, demand to know what the hell had happened to the woman I married. But I didn't. Not at first. The night it boiled over started like any other. I'd made dinner, steak and roasted potatoes, her favorite. She came home late, as usual, and immediately dropped her bag on the counter, scrolling through her phone with one hand while she poured herself a glass of wine with the other. "Dinner's ready," I said, my voice tight. She didn't even look up. "I'm not that hungry," she muttered, taking a sip of wine. "Not that hungry?" I snapped, the words slipping out before I could stop myself. "Are you ever hungry anymore? Or am I just wasting my time cooking for someone who doesn't give a shit?" Her head jerked up, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me? You heard me?" I said, slamming the oven door shut. "I've been bending over backwards to make this marriage work, Danielle. And for what? So you can ignore me like I'm some goddamn houseplant?" Her face twisted into that smug, infuriating smirk she'd perfected over the past few months. "Oh, here we go," she said, crossing her arms. "Ryan's little pity party. Poor you, doing so much for your ungrateful wife. Do you want a medal? A round of applause?" Something in me snapped. "You're damn right I want something. How about a little respect? Or at least an acknowledgement that I exist beyond being your goddamn roommate." Danielle rolled her eyes, the smirk never leaving her face. "God, you're so dramatic. Not everything has to be about your fragile little ego, Ryan. Maybe you should grow up and stop whining every time things aren't perfect."
Fragile ego.
I spat, my voice rising. "Are you fucking kidding me? You've checked out of this marriage, Danielle. Hell, I'm not even sure you like me anymore, let alone love me." Her smirk faltered, but only for a second. "You want the truth?" she said, her tone venomous. "Maybe I don't. Maybe I'm sick of you clinging to me like some desperate puppy, begging for scraps of attention." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, my chest heaving, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Wow," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "At least now I know where I stand. Thanks for clearing that up." "Oh, don't be so fucking sensitive," she snapped, rolling her eyes again. "It's not like I said I don't care about you. I just don't have time to stroke your ego 24/7. "You know what?" I said, grabbing my keys off the counter. "Fuck this. And fuck you." Her eyes widened, but she didn't say a word as I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't go far that night, just drove aimlessly through the streets of Denver, my grip tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white. My mind was a storm of anger, humiliation, and something else, grief, for the man I used to be, for the marriage I thought I had. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, staring at the neon open sign buzzing in the window. I sat there for what felt like hours, letting the engine idle, the sound of it drowning out the deafening silence in my head. By the time I got home, the house was dark. Danielle was already in bed, and I was grateful for it. I didn't want to look at her, much less speak to her. I crashed on the couch, still in my work clothes, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next morning, I woke to the sound of pots and pans clanging in the kitchen. I stumbled in, still groggy, to find Danielle making breakfast like nothing had happened. She was humming under her breath, her hair in a messy bun, flipping pancakes on the stove. "Morning," she said cheerfully, not even looking at me.
I stærte her, dumbfundet.
Was this her idea of an apology? Playing Susie Homemaker after telling me the night before that she might not even love me anymore? "You're up early," she said, setting a plate of pancakes on the table. "Thought I'd make us breakfast." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Are you fucking serious right now?" She turned, blinking at me in mock confusion. "What's your problem now?" "My problem," I said, my voice rising. "My problem is that you tore into me last night, told me you're sick of me, and now you think you can just make pancakes and everything will be fine?" Danielle's face hardened. "I was trying to do something nice, but clearly you're in one of your moods again." "Don't do that," I snapped, pointing a finger at her. "Don't act like I'm the crazy one here. You said some seriously fucked up things last night, Danielle. Do you even care? Or are you just going to keep pretending everything's fine?" She sighed, crossing her arms. "What do you want from me, Ryan? An apology? Fine.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I shouldn't have said what I said. Happy now. Her tone was so insincere, so dismissive. It made my blood boil. No, I said coldly. I'm not happy. Because you don't mean it. You don't give a shit, Danielle. You're just saying what you think I want to hear, so I'll shut up and leave you alone. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually try to deny it. But instead, she snapped. You know what, Ryan? Maybe I'm not the one who needs to apologize. Maybe you should take a good, hard look at yourself and realize that you're not exactly a picnic to live with. I laughed bitterly. Oh, here we go. The real Danielle finally comes out. Let me guess. I'm boring, right? Predictable? Not exciting enough for you? Maybe you'd rather be with someone else. Someone who actually deserves you. Her silence was deafening. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. You don't even have the guts to deny it. Danielle turned back to the stove, her movements stiff. I'm done with this conversation, she said quietly. Of course you are, I shot back. Because God forbid you actually have to deal with the consequences of your actions. It's so much easier to just shut down and pretend nothing's wrong. Isn't it? She didn't answer, just flipped another pancake onto the plate and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, shaking with rage. That was the moment I realized I was done. Done trying to fix something that was so obviously broken beyond repair. Done begging for scraps of affection from someone who couldn't even muster the decency to care. But what came next I wasn't ready for. Not even close. I spent the rest of the weekend avoiding her. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of everything unsaid. I went to the gym, took a long drive into the mountains, even stopped by a friend's place for a beer. Anything to avoid going home. When I finally did, late Sunday night, the house was dark. Danielle was in bed, and I was grateful not to face her. I crashed on the couch again, the ache in my chest growing heavier with every passing hour. But things took a turn on Monday. Started with her phone. Danielle had left it on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly as I walked past to grab coffee. I wouldn't have given it a second thought, until I saw the name flashing on the screen. Tyler. The name didn't mean anything to me at first, but something about it gnawed at the edges of my mind. Who the hell was Tyler? The buzzing stopped, replaced by the soft chime of a text message. Against my better judgment, I picked up the phone. The preview was right there, taunting me in bold letters. Tyler, last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. I froze. My mind raced, trying to find some rational explanation, some innocent context that could make sense of what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew. My hands were shaking as I unlocked her phone. She never bothered to change her passcode. Why would she? I'd never had a reason to check before. But now the dam had broken. I opened her messages with Tyler, and my world collapsed. The text stretched back for months. Flirty comments, inside jokes, plans to meet up when I was working late or out of town. The kind of shit that left no room for interpretation. One message stood out like a knife to the gut. Danielle, I can't wait until we have more time. Ryan's been so fucking clueless. It's almost funny. My stomach churned as I scrolled further. Pictures. Goddamn pictures. Selfies of them at some bar. His arm slung casually around her shoulders. A shot of her lying in bed, the sheets barely covering her, with a caption that made me see red. Danielle, wish you were here. Couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was drowning in it. The betrayal was suffocating, wrapping around my chest like a vice. I stumbled into the living room, my mind spinning. How long had this been going on? How could she lie to my face night after night, while sneaking around behind my back? The sound of her footsteps snapped me back to reality. Danielle appeared in the doorway, her hair damp from the shower, wrapped in a towel. She froze when she saw the phone in my hand. Ryan, she said slowly, her voice careful. What are you doing with my phone? I held it up, my grip so tight my knuckles turned white. You want to explain this? Her eyes darted to the screen, and I saw it, the flicker of panic before she masked it with indifference. You went through my phone? Don't, I said, my voice low and trembling with barely contained fury. Don't turn this around on me. Who the fuck is Tyler? Her jaw tightened. He's just a friend. I laughed bitterly. A friend? Really? Is that what you're calling it now? Friends send each other texts about how incredible last night was? Friends take pictures in bed? Don't insult my intelligence, Danielle. Her shoulders stiffened, and for a moment, I thought she might try to deny it again. But then she sighed, her expression hardening. Fine, she snapped. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Tyler. Are you happy now? Happy, I repeated, my voice rising. You think I'm happy finding out my wife is fucking someone else? Jesus Christ, Daniele. Her eyes flashed with anger. Maybe if you weren't such a boring, predictable asshole, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. The words hit me like a slap. I staggered back, staring at her in disbelief. You think this is my fault? You don't get it, do you? She shot back. I've been miserable, Ryan. Miserable. You're so goddamn dull. So wrapped up in your own little world. You didn't even notice I was slipping away. And this is how you handle it? I shouted. By screwing some guy behind my back? Instead of talking to me, you just throw everything we built away like it means nothing? Her face twisted into a sneer. Maybe it does mean nothing. Maybe I've been waiting for an excuse to get out of this fucking marriage. My breath caught. The weight of her words crushed me, stealing the air from my lungs. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave you everything, and this is what I get. She didn't respond, just stood there, arms crossed, her expression cold and defiant. I stared at her, my heart breaking into pieces. We're done, I said finally. You want out? Fine. But you'll regret this. One day, you'll regret every second of what you've done. Her silence was answer enough. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. And just like that, the life I thought I had was over. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to clear the storm raging in my head. I got into the car and drove, not knowing or caring where I was going. The streets of Denver blurred around me, headlights and street lamps streaking past like ghosts. My mind was on a loop, replaying every word Danielle had said, every lie she'd told, every smug glance she'd thrown my way as she crushed what little remained of my trust. I ended up in the parking lot of a motel on the outskirts of the city. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie red glow over the cracked pavement. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there in silence, staring at the wheel. How did it come to this? How did the woman I'd loved so fiercely, so completely, turn into the stranger who looked me in the eye and spat on our life together? I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The betrayal was a constant drumbeat in my head, relentless and unforgiving. The next morning, as sunlight broke over the mountains, I drove back to the house. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed answers. Danielle was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Good morning," she said flatly, not bothering to hide the sarcasm. I ignored her, went straight to the bedroom, and grabbed a suitcase. "What are you doing?" she called after me, her voice laced with annoyance. "What does it look like?" I shot back, throwing clothes into the suitcase with reckless abandon. "Oh, come on, Ryan," she said, appearing in the doorway. "Don't be so dramatic." I stopped and turned to face her, my anger boiling over. "Dramatic? You think this is dramatic? Finding out my wife has been screwing some other guy for months and didn't have the decency to even pretend she cared? If anything, I've been way too calm about this." She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. Don't you dare try to downplay this. You blew up our marriage, Danielle. You destroyed everything. And now you want to act like it's no big deal? Like I should just shrug it off and move on?" She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "What do you want me to say, Ryan? That I'm sorry? Fine.
I'm sorry.
But let's not pretend like everything was perfect before this. You're not exactly blameless here." I laughed bitterly. Blameless? You're right. I should have seen it coming. Should have seen the warning signs. But you know what? That doesn't excuse what you did. Nothing does. Her face hardened, the last remnants of her mask slipping away. Fine. Leave. See if I care. I stared at her, the woman I'd once thought I'd grow old with, and realized there was nothing left to say. Don't worry, I said quietly, grabbing my suitcase and heading for the door. You won't have to see me again. And just like that, I walked out of the house we'd built together, leaving behind the life I thought I knew. The weeks that followed were a blur. I moved into a small apartment downtown, threw myself into work, and tried to rebuild some semblance of a life. The nights were the hardest. Long, empty hours filled with silence and too much time to think. Danielle tried to contact me a few times. A text here, a voicemail there. She was all over the place. One message apologetic, the next defensive, the next angry. I ignored them all. Then, one evening, I got a message from an unknown number. Tyler, man. I think we need to talk. My blood ran cold. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then curiosity and anger got the better of me. I typed back, me talk about what? The reply came almost instantly. Tyler. Danielle. She's been lying to both of us. The words hit me like a freight train. Lying to both of us? What the hell did that mean? I agreed to meet him at a bar downtown. When I arrived, Tyler was already there, nursing a beer. He looked younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. I didn't think you'd come, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Start talking, I said coldly. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. Look, man, I didn't know she was married at first. She told me you were just her ex, that you were still living together because of money problems or some shit. I didn't find out the truth until later, and by then what? I demanded. He sighed, looking genuinely uncomfortable. By then I was in too deep. She told me she was miserable, that you treated her like shit, that you didn't care about her. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. I ended it, he said quickly, as soon as I found out the truth. But she kept coming back, texting me, trying to get me to see her again. I stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Danielle hadn't just betrayed me. She'd spun a web of lies so intricate, it was hard to know where the truth ended and the bullshit began. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice low. Because you deserve to know, he said simply. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Danielle's betrayal wasn't about me. It was about her. Her selfishness, her insecurities, her inability to face her own shortcomings. And for the first time I felt free.